Cone, and I am the PIO for the Stowe County Public Works Department. Before we begin, I'd like to take just some housekeeping items. We do have an exit off to the right here and one behind me. The bathrooms are in the back, and there's also a fire extinguisher against the back wall. We have a brief announcement about the availability of language assistance for anyone that needs Spanish interpretation services. I'm going to have Desiree Bravo, who is our interpreter, make that announcement right now.
Hola, buenas noches. Mi nombre es Desiree Bravo. Muchas gracias por acompañarnos esta noche. Como Shelly dijo, mi nombre es Desiree Bravo y voy a asistir con la traducción a español. Antes que todo, queremos dejarles saber que hay dos salidas, una aquí a la derecha y otra atrás de mí. También hay baños al fondo del cuarto y un extinguidor de fuegos para emergencia. Antes de que empecemos, queremos dejarles saber que esta presentación va a estar disponible en español. Después de la presentación, en un par de días, también se presentará y estará disponible con subtítulos en español para todos los que estén interesados.
Okay, thank you, Desiree. All right, so tonight we have a short presentation that will cover the condition of the Arroyo Grande levee, action levels for the levee, public notifications and the evacuation order process, and how you can be prepared. The presentation will be followed by a Q&A, so we ask that you hold your questions to that portion of the meeting. At this time, I'd like to introduce District 4 Supervisor Jimmy Paulding, who will make some opening remarks.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming out tonight. Of course, we all wish it was a better topic of conversation as we are enjoying the holidays, but it is a really important conversation, and it's important that you're here and those that are watching from home on our live stream. The goal of the county here is to ensure that everybody is prepared as possible for the storms that we will see between now and this winter season. And as you all know, in January, February, March, we saw quite a lot of water. And we learned terms like cyclone bombs and atmospheric rivers for the first time. And we want to make sure that if we see that level of rain and flooding events, that we are prepared as a community. So thank you for being here. Thank you to the Oceana Community Services District for allowing us to use this facility. And thank you to our staff for preparing the presentation that you all see tonight. One of the things that we have done as a county is try to rehabilitate the AG Creek levee to protect against the flooding impacts that we saw earlier this year. Our staff will get into more detail as to what we have done and talk about where we are in terms of risk level based on how much rain we get. One of the unique circumstances we find ourselves in is that the Lopez Lake is full this year. So whereas before, earlier this year, it was not. And so that means the more water we see, the more overtopping, potentially more flows in the creek, which could lead to more impacts to the levee. I just want to encourage everybody to really sign up for the evacuation notifications that you'll see tonight, participate in your evacuation zones, and communicate as much as you can to your neighbors about being prepared, because the better prepared you are, the better you'll be able to deal with the evacuations and potential flooding concerns. So thank you again for being here, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to our staff. Next slide, I'll introduce our staff. Oh, it's right here. It's a mouse. Just roll it. There we go. Perfect. Okay, so here today from our Public Works Department, we have Courtney Howard, who is our Water Resources Division Manager. Yay. From our Office of Emergency Services, we have Scotty Jalbert, who is the Director of OES. We've got Sergeant Kevin Norris from our Sheriff's Office. From 5 Cities Fire Authority, we have Fire Chief Lieberman. From CAL FIRE, we have our Fire Chief John Owens. And then from Public Works, we already met Shelley, our Public Information Officer. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Courtney Howard to talk about next steps.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here and thanks for the opportunity to provide this information. Just to start with a high-level overview, this is a picture of the Arroyo Grande Creek watershed. The upper part of the watershed, rain falls up there, it lands and makes its way into Lopez Lake, which then fills up and can spill into Arroyo Grande Creek. The lower parts of the watershed drain and make their way down to Arroyo Grande Creek, down to the levee system, and out to the ocean. So starting with that big picture, and then zooming in to the levee portion. The red line represents the north side of the levee, and the blue line represents the south side of the levee. We were successful in getting permits to increase the capacity of that channel. We finished that project in 2020. However, that we can only do so much, and the bigger storms, it would exceed the capacity of that levee portion, which is what we want to talk about today, to being ready for. What we see in the severe storms and what we saw this winter were downed trees and then a buildup of debris and sediment. And these impacts can lead to damage such as overtopping and the erosion that happens as it's draining over the levee. The other impacts we see are scouring of the inside of the levee, and we also see what we call through seepage, where the water levels, when they're high inside the creek, they can find their way through cracks in the levee, through the soil system, and out the other side, which causes additional erosion. So those are some of the impacts in these severe storm events that we're watching out for, and it can lead to an actual breach of the levee, which is what we experienced this season. And when the levee breaches, it flows out into the floodplain and can have these severe impacts that you all have experienced. What we've done to repair some of that damage, we were able to do between storms and during storms. We were able to repair some of the outside slope damage with rock and levee protection. We were able to fill in the breached portion of the levee. We were also able to lay down some plastic to help prevent that through seepage. And that was really important work to do because it helped us get through the March storms. After the storm season, we were successful in restoring to the 2020 design capacity using our existing environmental permits. We were able to also restore some of the reinforcement mat to help address some of the erosion that can happen when it does overtop, so we don't have that continuing impact. What we're still working on because of the complexity of design is that through seepage issue. But we need to take some time to make sure we can design it properly and find a qualified contractor to go in and do the work. We're also working with FEMA to make sure the work would be reimbursable. What we want to do is put a hydraulic barrier in the middle of the levee so that we can prevent the water from going all the way through. So we're in the process of trying to find a qualified contractor and hope to do the work within the next 6 months. In the meantime, we do have that levee protection with the plastic on the inside slope of the north levee, so we can make it through this storm season in the interim while we get that project done. So with that, still a vulnerable condition, and with messaging of El Nino and the uncertainties with how much water and the intensity that we're going to get, we don't know how saturated things are going to get, and we've got Lopez Lake is at 95% full. There's just a lot of variables and uncertainties. Our message is let's be prepared. So let's be ready for what we experienced last season. It could happen again. We know it's going to happen again. We don't, but let's be ready. So what are those action levels that we've set and established based on what we've learned? Basically, we've, because of those uncertainties, because we're still working on that project, we set our bar pretty low. Pretty much any storm, we're paying attention and we're getting ready. So that certain level of intensity of 0.2 inches per hour and 2 inches within a 24-hour period, that's really getting our attention. So what kinds of things do we do when we see that storm in the forecast? What we call our pre-storm conditions, Public Works, is we're going out to the levees one more time to make sure that all the flap gates are working, any downed debris that we can remove is removed. We're checking with our staff teams to make sure that they're available to patrol during the full storm. We're beginning to coordinate with the emergency leaders, OES, and others. When the storm hits, we open our Levee Operations Center, which is a trailer that we have out at 22nd Street, so that we can be on site and start our patrols and start looking at the conditions and confirming and communicating those conditions continuously with the emergency leaders so they can make informed decisions. And at some point, we'll confirm that the flow is decreasing and the storms are subsiding, and we close the Levee operations at that post-storm determination, and then continue with our post-storm inspections to see if there was any damage and address any of those issues. So those are kind of our different action levels. I'll talk more now about the full storm, what we look for. So our key things that we look for are the potential to overtop to the south, the north levee vulnerabilities, that through seepage and erosion if we see it, and then the coastal lagoon area, so Meadow Creek area. I'm going to talk about that real quick just to remind everyone that we do have some flow that goes directly to the Meadow Creek area and drains into the lagoon area. And I just want to speak about the importance of the flap gates and how those work. When Arroyo Grande Creek is higher than Meadow Creek, we don't want it backflowing into Meadow Creek and exacerbating or making it worse in that lagoon area. When Arroyo Grande Creek is lower, then it can drain. We don't want it to go back and make it even worse. So that's the importance of making sure those flap gates aren't jammed open so that they can function properly. So appreciate your help in keeping an eye out for that so our patrols don't have to try to get down there and unjam it. But that's definitely a key thing we look for when we're out patrolling. We're looking for that down debris. We're looking for erosion. We have a repair contractor on standby that if it's safe, then we'll have them go out and address anything we see. We're continuously talking to the emergency leaders about what we're seeing. We're verifying that the stream gauge levels are accurate and trying to estimate that timing of creek level peaks. And we've kind of set some triggers based on that experience so that we give enough time for people to evacuate should that be warranted. This is just a picture of some of the field measure or devices that we have to go along with our online system of real-time weather data that anyone can access. So if you're interested in watching the activity of the rain gauges and the stream levels, that's our website for real-time weather information. So there's a lot of variables. While we've set some guidance on in terms of numbers and what we're seeing, that can change based on our continuous monitoring of the conditions. If Lopez is spilling, if there's down debris, if we're seeing erosion, we can make these recommendations to emergency leaders quicker than what this might show. So I just want to have that overall caveat that while we have this guidance, if there's anything we see that warrants giving the recommendation to evacuate, we would make that recommendation. But in general, we're looking for the creek levels moving through 27 feet at 22nd Street and more rain on the way, more intense rain on the way. Again, it might be sooner. We want to make sure that we're giving the evacuation warning early so that there's plenty of time to get ready. But we want to be thoughtful about evacuation orders. So if we're seeing that continued increase at higher levels and that rain continuing, then we'd likely recommend that evacuation orders be issued. We're also looking at the lagoon area for continued rise. So that's kind of our guidance that we have, in addition to any kind of condition that we think warrants communicating with Office of Emergency Services on issuing certain warnings or orders. So that's how Public Works is out in the field and looking at conditions and communicating to our emergency leaders. And I'll turn it over to our emergency leaders at this point to talk about notifications.
Thank you, Courtney. Can you guys hear me okay in the back? Okay, so my name is Scott Gilbert, and I'm with Office of Emergency Services, and our office has many responsibilities. But the two ones that really impact you in this situation is, number one, that we're responsible for coordinating the response and recovery of an incident, and the second part is the alert notification. So let me ask you guys a question. How many of you were impacted by the AG Levee evacuations last year? Raise your hand. Okay. How many are potentially possibly evacuated in the areas that live in the remote areas, right? So preparation is the key, and being prepared is what we're here to talk about today. So part of this is terminology, right? So we've heard the terms evacuation warning, we've heard the term evacuation order. Sometimes that gets confusing. What does that exactly mean? So an evacuation warning means is that we're getting ready. We're at a situation, as Courtney pointed out, that we've hit a trigger or decision point where we start having conversations where there's a potential that things could get worse. So a decision is made to issue an evacuation warning. That means we notify everybody, and we'll explain the where of the certain zones that there is a potential for an evacuation order. So who here has heard of ready, set, go? Has anyone ever heard that before? So ready means you're always ready to prepare. You have a go bag. You're ready to go at a moment's notice. Set means that when we issue an evacuation warning that you're prepared to be evacuated. And we'll get a little more into the specifics in a little bit. And then when we say go, that's the evacuation order. And what we don't want to do is wait at the time of the order to try to figure out what to do, right? So the order means is we need you to leave the area. That's where we contact the sheriff's office. The sheriff's office issues a closure. They remove everybody from the area. We close, secure the area, and wait till we can return. Now, there's a third protective action that you may hear us use, probably not in this situation here with the levee, but it's called shelter in place. And that's when we want you to stay put, right? We want you to stay inside your home or stay in a certain location because we don't want to move. Does that make sense? Okay. So how do we make our notifications? Well, we use a whole bunch of tools to make sure that you're notified because not one works for everybody. So we'll start off at the top. Who here has heard of Zone Haven? Okay, Zone Haven. Yeah, some people. Zone Haven is a new software that we contracted with this year. And what we did basically is we took the entire county and we made it into a giant puzzle. And we took the puzzle pieces and we broke it up into sections and we issued numbers to each one of those sections. And the concept is if we have to do a large-scale evacuation, we may say you need to evacuate FIV E024. And then you're like, oh, I know what zone I live in, because the concept is know your zone. And then we'll issue that number so everybody knows what zone they live in, and it makes the evacuation a little more streamlined. So we have that. We have a WIA, which is a wireless emergency alert. Has anyone ever gotten a wireless emergency alert before? Okay, yeah, it's on your phone. You don't have to opt in. You don't have to do anything with that system. It automatically comes over your phone. The next one is reverse 911. Who here has received reverse 911 calls, right? The thing I want you to understand is that reverse 911 is an opt-in system. It's not automatic. Now with the landlines, if you have an old copper line, it is automatic because it's geo-referenced. But you have to opt into the system. And so in order to get a reverse 911 call, go to readyslow.org and you can follow and we'll have some more information, there's some handouts in the back, and you go and you register your cell phone. You can register your cell phone to receive reverse 911 calls. So you'll get an audible call, and then you'll also get a text that goes along with We use traditional TV and radio medias like we have on the back. We'll reach out, we'll issue information to them, and they'll put it in those, you hear it on the radio, they'll issue it on the TV. We have social media. Who here is connected? Who isn't connected to social media? That's really the question, right? So we utilize all the different platforms to try to get that message out, because there are certain people out there, that's where they get their news, that's where they get their information, so we utilize that. We have our siren system. We'll probably only use in an extreme situation, but it is a tool in our toolbox. If we have to use it, we can. Our EAS is our emergency alert system, so when you're watching the TV and it goes, want me to do that again? Right, so it goes on TV and has a little bar and gives you the information. We will utilize that system on TV and on the radio. We have route alerting, and that's when our law enforcement partners go out to the streets. They may use their PAs, they may go door to door, and they're advising everybody it's time to do an evacuation. We have ReadySlow.org, which is our website, and I know you're going to hear me beat that drum today into Ready Slow, because that's where we put our information. So when there's an actual evacuation order, or there's an emergency, if you go under the tab of Ready Slow under emergency, that's where we will post all the different information. We can have information from all over the county with different things like we saw last year on January 9th. So those are the different tools that we use in the toolbox to notify you. And we're hoping that at least obviously one gets to you, but hopefully multiple ones get to you that keep you informed. And there we go. Okay, so who's seen this map before? Right, so we've taken the AG Levee area, and we've basically broken it up into 3 different sections. You have the south area, which is south of the levee, you have north of the levee, and then you have the lagoon area. Does everyone feel comfortable where they live and on this map? So everyone should be familiar which areas, because that's the terminology that we're going to use along with our evacuation zones. And then again, we have more information, we have it on our website. So I talked a little bit about zone haven. So when we do the evacuations, we're going to issue, like I said, you're going to see a WIA, you're going to see a reverse 911, traditional media, and we're going to give a geographical description, south of the levee, north of the levee, or lagoon, and you're also going to get your zone. So if you know, for an example, kind of helped you with the test. Don't tell me when I gave you the answer. But if you live south of the levee, you're in SLC E315. That's your zone number, right? So the best thing you can do is write that zone number down, put it somewhere, put it on your phone. We can put it on your refrigerator somehow, but those are the types of zones. So we have that one, we have 5E24 and 5E25. The thing I want you to remember is you have to pay attention, because in that area, it's quite possible that we can issue an evacuation warning for the north area, an evacuation order for the south area, and I'm just making this up, and we can issue a shelter in place in the lagoon area. So you have to really pay attention to which zone or what protective action that we give you. Okay, now with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sergeant Norris, and he's going to talk about the evacuation process and security.
Hey Scott, how's it going? Sergeant Kevin Norris with the Sheriff's Office. I'm one of your sergeants down here out of South Station. So I will be here and be one of your point of contacts for anything that goes on. So obviously we beat it. Talked about it a lot and everything with your guys' zones and preparedness, and that's ultimately what we're here for, is to get you guys as prepared as possible. I'm not here to give you guys an exact route or anything to get out, but I want you guys to be able to understand if we're evacuating certain areas on your potential routes that you can get out. You guys all live here, you're part of the community, so you guys are going to be familiar with these areas. So if you're looking at this map, if we're talking about north of the levee, the purple area down at the bottom that's got all of the fun squigglies there, all the routes here, the green is going to be your easiest access routes, and there's choke points where it gets red or orange and stuff like that. Again, I'm not here to tell you what the best way to go is. Everything's going to be dictated upon what the weather is, what the conditions are, and traffic and everything. So when we talk about moving forward, and if you're going to be evacuating, what I ask is that you guys just have maybe 2 or 3 routes, right? So if we go out and it's super impacted one way, you have a different way that you can go in order to be able to get you, yourself and your family or anybody out safely. So just kind of make sure you know where you're at and where you can go. We have some numbers down here. I don't want you guys to get too caught up in them, but the way that we're kind of working with them is we've looked through all of like how many passenger cars and everything, how many people are in the area. So if you have like a worst case scenario for a single vehicle to leave, 47 minutes, right? Average vehicle evacuation, 21 minutes. And these are all averages on depending on what happens with those areas. So this is kind of just knowing your areas, just like what Scott was telling you, is super important, and then having the best way in order to keep going. So same thing with the lagoon. We did the exact same evaluations, everything that's in there, and knowing the same exact areas. So if you're in the lagoon area, the 0.5, these are going to be your best routes that you're able to get out. And same thing with the south area. For those of you guys in the south area, obviously there are some more limitations because of roads in and out down there, depending on where you're at. So it's very important to know what your guys' best routes in order to get out. So this is with combining every single one of those areas. If they were all had to be evacuated and you were trying to get out, again, for worst case scenario, single vehicle evacuated conditions, 2 hours and 4 minutes. That's the worst case scenario. Obviously, we're hoping not to get to that point. So one of the things I do like to talk about is security. Obviously, that's a big question for a lot of people, especially if you're leaving your homes for a certain amount of time. You guys want yourselves to be, getting evacuated. You guys also want to make sure that your homes and your property and everything is secure. So a couple things that can help with that. One thing is be prepared. Scott kind of talked about the go bags and stuff like that. I highly encourage people, I don't want you guys to be paranoid, but in order to be prepared, have something that you can grab quickly and go ahead and evacuate the area readily, whether it's changes of clothes, little nutrition bars, waters, those kind of things. That's super important to be able to get out there quickly, and then make sure your house is secure when you're leaving. You should have a little bit of time. You should be able to lock all your windows, lock all your doors. If you're leaving other vehicles there, make sure you lock all of your vehicles, any type of outbuildings that you have, so that everything is locked and secured prior to leaving your residence. One of the big things now, a lot of us have cameras. Make sure your cameras are all charged up, depending on what kind of system you have. If you have a hardwired system, that may be different. A lot of people have like Arroyo, Ring, those type of systems. You can make sure your batteries are charged up or hardwired in. That helps because you're going to be able to monitor your own house, and then if something's going on or if there's someone at your house that after you evacuated, you guys can call us and you guys can give us exactly where we need to go, exactly what's happening, and then law enforcement will be able to respond accordingly. For those of you that do not have our dispatch number, obviously it's all over the place, but in this type of a situation, my dispatch center is going to be super inundated with calls. So they're going to be getting a lot of 911 calls that people need emergency services. If there's something that's not life-threatening, we ask that you call our dispatch line, which is the 781-4550. That will get you to a dispatcher, and they will be able to dispatch out any related problems. Again, if it's an emergency, obviously call 911, and we will take care of you guys that way. But that's just another resource for you there. Another one for your house is indoor and outdoor lighting. I highly encourage everybody to have their indoor and outdoor lighting out there, floodlights, motion sensor lights. Leave a light on inside so people aren't aware of dark homes or anything else like that. Another one too is sometimes, obviously, depending on power outages, different things, ensure your address can be well seen and is lit up. If we as deputies are trying to go out, find a location that you need something from, or if there's someone out there, us being able to find it is very important. Obviously, we have all our systems now. We will get there, but if we can see an address readily, then that's super important and saves us a lot of time. We will have, in these type of events, we call out a lot of people. We will have patrols going around. We will be doing evacuations. When we talked about earlier about if we go out and we, evacuate you in person or via over PA announcements, by all means, try and talk to us. Just please remember the deputies are probably going to be very busy doing a lot of things. They're probably not going to be able to converse for 10, 15 minutes. So give them a little bit of grace, please, with that one. They're probably going to tell you exactly what you need, and then just make sure you guys can follow that and do what you guys need to do to get out of the area. We will also have, at any evacuation points, we will have a representative from the Sheriff's Office in order to assist anybody that needs anything. And just remember the preparedness, if you need to be able to have medications and stuff like that, because if we get evacuated out, we're not going to try and obviously go back in because a lot of our closures. That is all I have.
Okay, so now we get to the fun part, right? So we're going to talk a little about preparation and being ready to do. Statistically, right, if we look at the projected weather, and we look at the condition of the levee, and we look at the trigger points that we have, and we look at Lopez, there's a high likelihood that we're going to have to issue protective actions in this area. And with that being said, what we don't want to get is evacuation fatigue. And we've seen this in fire areas, we've seen this in other disasters, where the likelihood is we may have to issue warnings or evacuations 3 or 4 times this winter season. And we asking you or telling you it's time to go, it's time to leave. And we leave for 24 hours, and then you got to come back, and then 2 days later we're doing it again. Who here would get tired of that situation, right? But here's the thing, we're doing it for your safety. And it's really important that we don't take it lightly or just go, oh, I'm going to stay, I've done it 3 times, nothing has happened thus far. Because it's the one chance that thing actually does happen is when we're going to get caught, right? So we want to make sure that you're prepared for that. And I'm asking you that I understand it's completely inconvenient, and it's going to be troublesome, and it's going to be really annoying, but this is all for your safety, okay? Okay, so preparing your home. Before any of this happens, again, preparing for the worst case scenario, right? I drive my family nuts because I'm the guy that walks around going, if it's predictable, it's preventable, and we need to prepare, and I have drinking water, and I have food in my house, and my wife's just looking at me like, what the heck, right? But you got to be prepared. So with that, take pictures of your home. Why are we doing that? Well, we're taking pictures of home, something happens, you have evidence with the insurance companies of things that you had, like furniture and items around the house, that you can show to them, and the contents. So has anyone ever had to report anything to their insurance company before? Right? And then could you imagine in my past life having to deal a lot with this, where someone loses their home, they lose everything in there. And then they got to sit there at the insurance company and like a fire, and they got to try to figure out what did I have? Who here remembers everything that they have? So by taking these pictures, it's super helpful. You can keep it in Dropbox, or you keep it on your phone, you keep a record of it, so if something bad happens, you have documentation. Make sure, find out, who here has flood insurance. If you have flood insurance, that's great. If you don't, or you're not sure, contact your insurance company. Find out if you do have flood insurance. Find out what happens if there is a flood. Get that information ahead of time. In the event where, I love the mouse. There we go. In the event that there's an evacuation warning is coming, or there's water, or we're going to get rain, take those real valuable things that are irreplaceable, get them off the ground, right? Have emergency supplies. In the back, we have some handouts for you to give you some information, some things to think about. Also, too, if you can go to readyslow.org, there's further information there. But what are some of the things that we should have on hand for emergency supplies, right? Some of the basic food, water, making sure that we have that type of stuff. Who here has animals, domestic animals, right? We have backup food, because what if we get isolated into our homes and we have to take care of that, right? So having emergency supplies around the house in case that, for whatever reason, you may not be evacuated, but you have to hunker down. We all lived that through COVID, right? All the different things. I got those 4 jars of peanut butter on my COVID shelf still, just in case anything, right? And then securing documents. One of the things that I've learned personally is I've taken all the birth certificates, I've taken the marriage certificates, I take everything and I've scanned them. And I put a digital format and I put them in my Dropbox account. And that way, if something happens and I lose the hard copies, at least I got a digital copy. So those types of things of securing your documents. So, being prepared to evacuate. So now our home's ready, we're ready to go. Have an emergency plan. So we don't know when the evacuation orders are going to happen. It can be in the middle of the night, it can be at day, some of us could be working, some of you have children in school. Have an emergency plan that address how you're going to get a hold of each other and where you're going to meet up. Sergeant Norris talked about identifying your evacuation routes. It's really important now before the emergency happens is, one night, grab a coffee and go take a ride of how you're going to get out of that area. Make sure that you're familiar with those streets. Do it at nighttime. Take a drive at night. And then figure out what your alternative routes are if you have any. Because what if that road is blocked? What if a tree comes down? And what you don't want to do at the time of the emergency is try to figure out how to get out of the area. So pre-plan that one day. See, I told you I was a little crazy with my some nut drive around the neighborhood, right? Cup of coffee. Okay, all right. How are you going to communicate in an emergency, right? Do you have a point of contact? So we all rely on cell phones, right? But what if cell phones go down? What if we can't use cell phones? Maybe finding someone that is a report to person, you find out some way to get a hold of them so you have a point of contact and checking in to make sure that everybody is okay. Facebook, I think, has that check-in app. Has anyone ever used that before? That check-in app, that's another option that you can use. Making sure that you have a grab-and-go bag, and that's really important for you folks, right? So it's kind of like living in, as I call it, fire country. You guys should be ready to go. So as this winter time comes, as we're getting ready for our first series of storms, put together a go bag. Again, we have a handout with a checklist, but things like clothing, medications, phone numbers, phone chargers, how about animal supplies? You have all your stuff ready to go. So when those numbers that we saw in the time to evacuate, that was based on once we issued that evacuation order, that vehicles are on the road within 15 minutes. Okay? So we don't need to panic. We need to leave in an orderly fashion. But we should have a go bag ready to go so we're not sitting there scrambling at 2 o'clock in the morning trying to figure out what do I take with me, what don't I take. I always do this too, that I always have a rule in my house that, especially during storms or during fire season, that we keep at least 3/4 of a tank of fuel, drives my wife nuts, in the gas tank, because what you don't want to be is at 1/8 of a tank, and we have a storm, and the power's out, and the gas stations don't work. It is the worst situation being, or if you have a Tesla, making sure your car's charged. So make sure that your vehicles are ready to go, and make sure that your cell phone's charged, especially if we're focused on using that as an emergency notification. Power goes out, you may not be able, who here has got battery backups for your, those little portable battery backups? Those are always really good to have. Okay, so now we get to the point where it's time to evacuate. What are we going to do? So first off, we're going to secure our home. Like Sergeant Norris said, we're going to make sure our doors are locked, we're going to make sure our lights are on, we're going to make sure that the stove is off, we're going to take care of all those different things, secure our home, and then we're going to grab if you have domestic animals, and grab your supplies in your go bag, and you're going to safely drive out of the area, right? There's no need to speed. Take your time, because what's going to happen is as you're driving on the road, what's everyone else doing? Right? And the ones that the kids are driving, slapping their kids, going, hey, calm down back there. And people are distracted. People are, don't listen to the sergeant, talking on their cell phones. People are going to be distracted. So you have to be really attentive to driving safely out of the area. So what we don't want to do is cause that accident, and then that accident blocks the road, and then no one else can get out. And then what we established, and this was last year, we established a safe point. So there's no requirement to go here, but for whatever reason, if you want a safe point or you want to, you can go to the Oceano Community Center, and that's the point where we're going to have personnel, and hopefully we'll have more information. Realistically, we may not have any additional information. It may be that, hey, we've hit our triggers, the evacuation orders have been issued, we're waiting to see what's going to happen. But it's a point where everyone can gather, you can meet with your neighbors, you can meet with family members, whatever the case is. it is a point of location, so you can drive there. And then again, keeping an eye on readyslow.org. That's where we're going to post the information on the updates and utilizing all those other tools that we have. So our goal is not to keep you out of your home. Our goal is to get you home as soon as it's safely possible. And so as soon as we can, we're going to get you back to your house. If we get to a situation where this evacuation order, I mean last year, right, our evacuation orders were like overnight, right? What was the longest? I don't know, realistically, I don't have it in my head. Did we have anyone that was over 24 hours on the orders? We did. So we may, if we have that duration, we may set up shelters if there's a need. If we have a situation where people need a place to go, we will establish that. Part of your family emergency plan is, do you have a place to go? Do you have friends to go stay with, or family members, or a location to go? If not, then we need to establish shelters. We can do that. We talked about general information, right? So if it's a law enforcement issue, you're going to call the number that Sergeant Norris gave you. If you have general questions, we will have public information officers out at some point. It's going to take a little bit to get there, but we will get some people out there at the community center. But if you have questions and information, you can call this number, 543-2444, if you need additional information. So as far as repopulation goes, that means, okay, so one of the other things that you will see is that the orders have been lifted. We will use that terminology. So the evacuation orders have been lifted. Again, pay attention to which zone. They may have all been lifted, or we may have only lifted, let's say, for example, the north or the south. When that happens, we're going to do the same system. We're going to let everybody know that the orders have been lifted at which zones that we're talking about. Law enforcement is going to go ahead and unblock the roads. They're going to open up the roads and allow people back in. Again, using caution because people are distracted. Maybe the power's out, the light is low, all those different factors. When you get home, do a walk around on your home. Make sure that everything is secure, right? You come home and your front door is open, what are you going to do? Call them. Don't go in the house. Call them. Walk around the house. Is there any damage? Do you have any broken pipes? Is there anything that's wrong with your house? You're going to take note of that. You just don't want to go into your house and then everything's good and the next morning you realize you have a problem.